T would tell you he is a math and physics nerd, but his LinkedIn profile tells a different story, one about a multi-time founder who currently serves as the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Moogsoft. On this episode of IT Visionaries, Phil explains how he went from studying theoretical physics to finding a place in the tech industry, and then taking off from there. He dives into the big operational problems Moogsoft is trying to solve with AI, and he shares all the lessons he has learned through founding multiple companies. Enjoy this episode. IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform.
Welcome to another episode of IT Visionaries. I'm Ian Faison, Chief Content Officer here at mission.org. And we have, on the other line, Phil, what's going on?
Well, a normal Monday. So, I've already been up and down the length of the peninsula, meeting customers and prospects. And, the day starts early for me with a company that is spread across 8 time zones and 2 continents. You have to be up with the lark.
Indeed. We're going to get into what you're building at Moogsoft, your background, and AI ops, which is really, really interesting. But first, how did you get into technology in the first place?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I was growing up in the start of the PC revolution in the 1980s, and technology just started to be a thing. In fact, my first encounter with a computer was something inside of a wooden box that my maths teacher had constructed and brought into a math class to show off. So computers started to become a thing in my early teenage years, but my interest was always more in the pure science side of things. In fact, in my very early life, I was an academic theoretical physicist of all things. But computers were the tool that you used to analyze data, and I acquired, quite a lot of skills as a programmer, almost osmotically. And, when I made a big life change and decided that, I wanted to go out and earn an honest living, it was kind of natural that the software industry was where I, gravitated towards and ended up. And I got a couple of random jobs out of college, found my way to the industry in which I spent the last 30 years of my life, and, felt immediately in love and at home, and have stayed there ever since.
So after you got into technology and you started working, did you ever think that you'd be kind of a serial founder starting a bunch of companies?
No. In fact, actually, nothing could have been further from my mind. I had in my mind's eye that, I was going to spend some time in the computer industry and then eventually find my way back into, academic research. And, the whole company founding thing, I had no idea what was involved in it. It wasn't anywhere near my sort of experience set. Having said that, I guess my dad left a kind of a full-time job to open and run his own grocery stores, a little mini chain. So maybe the entrepreneurial sort of urge was somewhat in the DNA somewhere along the line. But no, I never thought I would be doing what I'm doing today. And I still think that the serial company founding thing was almost a necessary consequence of what I wanted to do with technology rather than the end in itself.
Yeah, it's so funny how that works, right? You see that little blip of entrepreneurship early in your life, and maybe it just plants something in there that you don't know until happens later. I want you to explain why you wanted to found Moogsoft and kind of what's the state of how the company's doing right now. So,
kind of almost going in reverse order. I mean, the company is doing fantastically well. I mean, we're an out and out success story, growing at, pretty close to, 75-80% a year. And, our future, I would say, is hopefully to realize the vision of the company at the beginning, which was to become the serial leader and disruptor in the AIOps space across multiple categories. And, it's kind of interesting. There's really a story at the beginning of Moogsoft of needing to do the company to solve a problem which we felt was, completely unaddressed and extremely important. And also, to be fair, opportunity, met need. So to kind of put a little bit of substance to that comment, I've been in the same industry for 30 years. We've been trying to build systems to help people make sense of their digital infrastructure really since I co-founded my first company at Micromuse. But what happened in the kind of the late part of the last decade was, I'd started an incubator with my co-founder at Moogsoft to investigate how we could use natural language processing, kind of the AI of its era and the origin of all the machine learning stuff, across many different use cases. Particularly, we had done a couple of experiments in the service assurance space that AIOps sits. And we became aware that a lot of our customers were running into the same problems when they were trying to use the old-fashioned legacy tools, that they just couldn't cope with the amount of change and the degree of complexity in their environment. And, as a result of which they had to throw bodies at the problem. And we figured that we had the solution with AI and machine learning, and we set out to try and use AI and machine learning to solve that problem. Starting the company and getting Moogsoft off the ground was the if you like, the necessary evil in which to experiment to see whether or not we could disrupt and we could, get a product that could be used by customers to tackle that problem.
Yeah, and speaking of, the company doing well, you were recently named one of the best workplaces for 2018 by Inc. magazine. You have, been featured in TechCrunch and a bunch of other places. But one of the things that I just found so fascinating and why we want to dive you on the show is this idea of like AI ops. What is this thing? Is this different than IT operations? Is it something that's similar, augmented? What are we talking about here?
It's really the next generation of IT operations. And the AI in the title is artificial intelligence. Now, I could bore about the distinction between artificial intelligence and machine learning. And, in all truth, AI and machine learning tend to get used interchangeably, and you are meaning typically the same thing in the industry when you use either term. But fundamentally, it's this. If you think about what has happened to infrastructure, whether it's applications, public cloud, network, whatever it is, the complexity and the scale of it has gone through many orders of magnitude change over the last 30 years. And specifically, the public cloud, containers, virtualization, all of the elastic digital enterprise that we all live in today, has taken it past a point of no return. And that point of no return is where a human being can grok it. A human being can get their head around it and understand how to, keep it all running and pointing in the same direction. And AI is essentially a tool to automate and control a system that has just got, effectively an infinite number of degrees of freedom, has become so complex and so fast changing that trying to sort of make some, human model of it, a rules-based system or a kind of a behavior model, is really not sufficiently accurate enough or capable or powerful enough to sort of put shape and form around turning the business mission of availability into the individual actions of what a technical person needs to do to the systems to keep them available and keep them running well. So I see IT ops as becoming AI ops. So the entirety of all of the use cases in IT ops will be addressed by an AI enhanced equivalent. So, you might pick problem management, trouble tickets, in the most sort of vernacular sense. There will be intelligent ticketing systems that are driven by AI, both as the point of contact between the system and the consumer, and both in terms of the way in which knowledge bases are leveraged to help resolution. Whether it's orchestration, how do I get my application deployed? There will be an AI equivalent to the traditional orchestration tools. And of course, in our particular speciality, Moogsoft's AI Ops is an AI-enabled equivalent to legacy systems, that use rules-based approaches that range from the very old, like my old company, Micromuse, to actually some of the newer entrants that claim to be something that they frankly aren't. They're just essentially NetCall in the cloud.
And who are the types of folks that you're working with? Are you working directly with CIOs and CTOs? Are you working with COOs? Like, what's kind of when you sit down with a customer, who are those people and what are they looking to solve?
So it depends on the customer. And yes, we do spend a lot of time talking to CIOs and CTOs, heads of operations, people who are responsible for service availability is very, very key. But, some of those terms are rooted in, maybe a more enterprise way of looking at how digital infrastructure is managed and maintained. If you move over to the more kind of e-commerce-y digital economy type businesses like, gaming companies like Ubisoft and GoDaddy, Yahoo, and so on, there they take much more of a Google-style SRE approach to service availability, the kind of the classic sort of DevOps setup. And there it can be, heads of engineering, because, all of a sudden engineering has responsibility for service availability. But fundamentally, what they have in their job title is, they're the people whose organizations are on the line to make sure that when a customer turns up to the new digital storefront, that they can do business with the company that they represent.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's got to be kind of interesting that over the years, how much your time has shifted spending with strictly IT professionals versus maybe more people, or maybe I'm totally off base there. I'm curious, like how much time do you feel like, in the early days with your other companies, you were working directly with IT?
Oh, I think that's very perceptive. If you go back to the days of Micromuse, it was almost entirely IT. In fact, I may even go further and say it was pretty much 100% IT. And it's really only in the last 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, that there's been, quite the focus on DevOps and DevOps-related functions. And so, with that, you do find yourself dealing with heads of engineering. So, if I was to try and put a number on it, I'd probably get the proportion wrong, but I'm going to guess and say around about a third of the people that we speak to are more kind of SRE, DevOps-y type folks. And part of the reason for that is actually the world is moving in that direction. So, we have enterprise customers that are organizing themselves increasingly like a software company.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like so many people are organizing like that, right? I mean, that's part of every company is a technology company now. Yeah. It is a huge part of that, right?
It categorically is, yeah, categorically.
And so whether you're in healthcare, whether you're a bank or, whatever it is, your digital infrastructure is, obviously completely different. And so do you feel like as you're talking about AI ops, that this is something new that people fundamentally don't understand? Do you feel like they're confused about how they're going to use AI or how like IT operations is going to change? Like, I'm curious, what are some of those kind of, pain points or things that people are worried about?
So a couple of years ago, I think that was absolutely the case. There really was a lot of, confusion as to how people were going to make that transition. And it was actually, I'll be honest, one of the reasons why I was instrumental in founding with a couple of other industry figures and customers, the AI Ops Exchange. And in fact, in the inaugural meeting last year, it was okay, we need to get together, to establish and promulgate best practice, because one thing's for sure, it will change how people work over a period of time. And, we're busy, on that journey to try and kind of quantify and assess what that boils down to. But it's less so. I would say that in, a good proportion, in excess of half of the engagements that we have with prospects, AI ops is a buying category now. There is an AI ops project underway. And in fact, actually, I said I was up and down the peninsula today talking to prospects and the like. Actually, one of the ones I was in today, the project is an AI ops project. They've set about trying to work out how to deploy AI ops in their environment. And we were part of the bake-off, and it looks very much like we've won them as a customer. And hopefully down the line we'll be able to talk about them as a customer. So it was a fun meeting. So very much more so today, it's a category that people buy against.
That's really fascinating. I mean, where does it go from here?
There is a dam which is beginning to leak, in my view. I think if you look at the investment across the enterprise in service assurance software over the last couple of decades, you are probably talking a fairly substantial multiple double-figure billions of dollars amount of investment. It may even be a three-figure billions of dollars amount of investment. And all of that is quite frankly going to be recycled. And I think that there is going to be, over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, an opportunity for a company that is attentive to its customer needs and willing to genuinely innovate, as opposed to to jump the bandwagons, to take a leadership position in that market. And it's one of the reasons why, I'm so excited about the prospects for my company, Moogsoft, is that I realize I'm very conscious of the fact. In some senses, it's almost a kind of an onerous obligation that we have a leadership position in that market, an opportunity to be that company, and frankly, an obligation to get there for our customers. And the reason why I say an obligation is because I know, because I run the company, that our commitment to innovation in this space is genuine, vigorous, and supported from the board all the way down through myself. I don't think that is a true statement for all the players in this market. I think there's a lot of opportunists, and the customers will not benefit from being customers of an opportunist in this market.
Switching gears to you as a founder, what are some of the things that when you started OTT, back in the 90s, like how have you evolved as a founder? How has creating a company evolved? I'm really curious, like what are some of the lessons learned over the companies that you founded over the years?
So it's a big question.
I know it's a loaded question, but
I mean, it's funny. Personally as an individual, there's some of your experiences, and I think things change so frequently that it would be wrong for me to say that I've acquired some sort of wisdom of Solomon over the decades, and now I know the answers to more questions than I knew beforehand, because as fast as you have answers to questions, that new ones appear. And I'm a strong believer in, it's a test of character rather than a test of knowledge, how well, you meet the challenge of a new company. So, maybe I've learned to be a little bit more patient than I was when I was a young man. Maybe I've learned to think maybe twice before I make decisions rather than believe in my first instinct. Sometimes that did used to get me into trouble back then. And I've also learned very much that the single most important thing that a company has is its culture. And pretty much everything else is secondary, because we're a people-based industry. And ultimately, Moogsoft is the product of the efforts and the passions and the energies of, the 230-odd people that make up the business today. And it's not about Phil T. I'm just a team member, maybe with a special responsibility to remind people of that. It's actually the culture of the company that supports and attracts the right people to deliver what it is that we're trying to deliver. But, the funny thing is, it's talking about starting companies. I was actually joking about this with somebody the other day. So let's say you and I decided that we had a great idea for a technology business and we're going to get a company off the ground. In the time it takes to do this interview, we could have a company formed. We could have a website up. We could knock up a prototype of some attractive UI and have all the necessary equipment, computer. It would be a cloud instance now, obviously, with Amazon, a bank account. We'd have all of that stuff would happen, at the speed of a click of a button. I remember when starting a company, there was a hardware order that you placed and you'd wait 3 weeks for it to arrive, right? It would come in boxes and cost a lot of money. And you would have to have capital to start a company. And, when you formed the actual legal entity of the company, you got something in the UK, and there was an equivalent in the US, of a thing called a company kit that included of all things, a seal, right? You had this thing, an official seal, that would leave an embossed kind of circular thing with the name of the company.
Yeah, totally.
And it was kind of wacky. In some senses, I kind of do occasionally get nostalgic for that kind of stuff. But the point that I'm making was that the speed of innovation was tied to some physical things that kind of have like a natural terminal velocity that they can move at. Whereas today, it's the speed of thought. You can have a brilliant idea, and for very little money, you can incorporate yourself, persuade maybe another couple of people to work for nothing, build a prototype using essentially free materials, free tools, free access to compute resources, and be in business for the price of price of a meal out in the Bay Area probably counts as capital these days, but the price of a meal out and you're off and running. Whereas I think not so much a Riversoft or an OTT or a Micromedia story, but the Riversoft story, my first hardware order was, $40,000 worth of equipment.
Wow. That's crazy.
Which was kind of like, that was serious dough back then.
Yeah. Well, and I think another thing too, it's all the little things, right? That, everybody has a computer now, right? So if you're starting a startup, like you don't need to outfit your whole company with stuff. Like now, eventually down the line, you do need to do that. It's more of like a growth problem than it is a starting problem. But it's like all those little things you can pretty much use freemium tools or really cheap tools for almost every single like part of launching the business now, unless you're working on obviously like a hardware startup or something like that. It's totally different. But
I sometimes say that the mainframe is probably the last bastion of undisruptible technology. So, if you are selling a piece of mainframe software, the likelihood that a garage startup is going to turn up with the latest version of some Kix application is slim to none, right? I mean, your competitors are going to be other companies that can afford to have access to that kind of compute. And people have forgotten that's how it used to be. Going back, 20, 25 years even, that's how it was. There was a barrier to entry. And, entrepreneurism wasn't as democratic as it is now, which I think is phenomenally exciting because it's bringing people into the entrepreneurial community that were frankly and shamefully previously excluded.
Oh, for sure.
Who don't come from mom and dad could afford to send me to to MIT or, Oxford or Cambridge in the UK, who maybe, didn't have the, I'll just get a bunch of straight A's until I'm, motivated enough to drop out of Harvard and start Microsoft. Right? I mean, that was the old way. The new way is people who are much more in touch with maybe the communities in which they grew up in and realize and understand and are able to, act in relevance against those needs and get into business and do wonderful things.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, we always joke when we were founding Mission that it was funny because like you talk about like raising a family and friends around, and we were all like, well, all of our families are broke and all of our friends are broke. So there's not exactly going to like pool family and friends money is the equivalent to beer money. So, there's nothing there, but there's all sorts of like programs and different things that you can apply to now, to be able to get that stuff, and actually I'm curious. So, you have a lot of, advantages from being a multi-time founder that you could, go to your investors and different people that saying like, hey, this is something that I think is going to be big. And then it kind of, became a much bigger, like you said, it actually is essentially a budget item. But I'm curious, like, in the early days when it wasn't a budget item, when it wasn't something that people was a need to have, when it was a nice to have, how did you think about, selling into IT when IT was, kind of at the height of its powers, but maybe not the height of its connection to the business like a lot of CIOs and IT leaders are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I'm asked about this by people, what's the secret of being able to get into business? There's two things really. I mean, one is always remember to be lucky, because that certainly helps. And if you can spend a bit of that luck, have good friends. So, when I'm specifically the Riversoft experience, for example, I had a very good friend, and he put some of his money on the line, to help me kind of get over the hump of, it cost capital those days to get going, but also use his reputation and access, to get me into conversations with, people who were capable of spending the money to become a customer in a way that, allowed me to, persuade them to back me. So I would say that it's really, there's no easy route at all. You have to be super persistent, passionate. You have to be prepared to be poor, because, it doesn't pay very well being an entrepreneur until it pays a lot. And, you have to be, if it pays a lot, you have to be, willing to take a lot of reverse and, just keep going.
Did you think that you wanted to start another company? Like, was this at this point you'd had, two companies? Like, why then? Was it on to the next thing, or how did that happen?
Yeah, it was kind of a version of the on to the next thing. Actually, Engini was a subtly different business. It was the one thing in my background that wasn't really out and out service assurance. It was around intelligent policy for data. And actually, I learned all kinds of things at Engini, most of which I could summarize with, I really am not that interested anymore in storage. It kind of convinced me of the fact that I much prefer service assurance. In fact, the original idea for Engini is kind of crazy, because we didn't get there, but lots of other people did, was this idea that a computer shouldn't be a physical thing, and that your entire sort of compute profile should follow your identity around. And of course, we didn't know it at the time, but we were kind of getting we had an early thought that was very much in parallel with ideas of cloud computing and so on and so forth. And we looked at lots of problems that we could solve that would move you along that way. And the one that we thought we could do something with was profile data. So the idea being that, in a very much more non-trivial way, you could have data spaces that are constructed around who you are, what you're doing, and where you're going, kind of thing, as opposed to just static disk partitions that had a directory structure that you mounted, and that was that. And, so we got going, got a company off the ground, and, we acquired some customers. We built the business up a fair chunk. The storage industry is just different to how service assurance worked. And there are, sales cycles were much longer and much more difficult to deal with. And, fundamentally what it came down to was we decided that it was not going to achieve scale as a startup company. And so Riverbed was in a better place to make sense of it.
Yeah, no, it's so fascinating to me. And it's such an interesting time kind of in the Valley, it's a very different time than now, which is kind of where I was going with it, was that just a funny slice in time where you had, the perfect place for then you to create Moogsoft like after that. And I just kind of thought it was an interesting slice of time. Because really, hitting, if you look back from, 2012 to now, it's essentially been economic growth for 7 straight years. So, it's a much different selling time, longer sales cycles and all that sort of thing is okay when people are, having better quarters every quarter. So, anywho, I just thought it was an interesting, timing, even though it was only a few years difference, that a much different ecosystem.
And also for reference, I was based in London at the time when I was doing Engini. And one of the experiences that I walked away with from Engini was that, were I to do another, growth startup gig, that I was going to make its headquarters in Silicon Valley, come hell or high water. And it was, top of the list of things that was going to be done with Moogsoft. When we started Moogsoft, the intention was always to bring, the companies over here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you say that. Okay, this will be the final question. Then we'll get in a lightning round. I'm super interested that you say that, because we hear a little bit of the scuttlebutt these days about like starting a company and putting the headquarters in Silicon Valley, even though there are a ton of really good advantages to it and a ton of disadvantages. Ultimately, your company's going to be headquartered wherever it is. Do you still think that that's important for certain companies to be here?
So it's categorically the case that you can build a great company anywhere, and I wouldn't wish to at all sort of back an idea or underline an idea that says to be any kind of success, you absolutely have to be here. But what I will say is that there is something utterly unique about Silicon Valley. The network effect of just the pure concentration of smart, aggressive, available capital, smart, entrepreneurial talent, and the infrastructure, whether it's patent attorneys to short-term rental space, literally everything you need to be the next Google is within a 30-minute drive from wherever you're based in the Bay Area, and that is unique on planet Earth. And the effect of that is to remove some risk, some delay, alter the odds a tiny, tiny, tiny bit in your favor. And who doesn't want to do that? Now, remember, I don't know when the last time is that you went to Las Vegas, but I'm pretty sure that
too frequently.
Too frequently. I'm pretty sure your house isn't as nice as some of the themed casinos on the Strip, right? I mean, every time you walk into a Venetian or a Wynn or wherever, you look around, you go, these guys spend a lot of money on marble, and it's a pretty swish kind of experience. That entire industry is based upon the fact that the casino owns zero on the roulette table.
That's exactly right.
So, it's just those tiny, tiny, tiny changes in percentages that work in your favor with being in Silicon Valley, that for me, if I was making a decision about where to base a company that I was starting, I just wouldn't think any further. And sure, the people are expensive, property is expensive, cost of living is expensive. The staff is incredibly difficult to hire, very difficult to retain. The weather sucks if you're in San Francisco. How about that? An English guy saying the weather sucks. And so on and so on. And the traffic is horrendous, and the absence of an integrated transport system, and it doesn't matter. The network effect and the everything else makes this the best place in the world to build a technology company.
Yeah, I think the interconnectedness between the people and the fact of how much collaboration happens here, I think is something you would never know unless you were here. Like, it is the antithesis of Wall Street in many ways with regards to how people behave, in my opinion. I grew up in Oakland, so I didn't grow up in quote unquote Silicon Valley, but after being gone for a long time and coming back here, that was the thing that really blew me away, is like people want to solve hard problems and they just want to meet other smart people. So that's cool that you said that. But like, as you said at the top, like, it doesn't really matter. And the thing that's great, my piece on this is that having a presence here is really important. Your whole company doesn't need to be here. Your employees can be remote. Like, our company is fully remote, but we have a huge presence here. And that's important for our network. But yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get into the lightning round. These questions are fast and easy, just like the Lightning platform from Salesforce. You can go to salesforce.com/employee experience to learn more about how you can improve employee experience at your company on the world's #1 CRM, that is Salesforce. Check it out, salesforce.com/employee experience. Lightning round questions. Phil, are you ready?
Yep.
Number 1, what app are you using on your phone that is the most fun?
So actually, dark sky. I'm a weather junkie. And, and in fact, I have a bit of an argument with my wife about what the best weather app is. But dark sky is fabulous. Great radar, the time machine, which allows you to look at what the weather was like 30 years ago. I mean, it's just, it's fun.
Favorite vacation spot?
Favorite vacation spot, without a shadow of a doubt, is Italy. And if possible, either in the mountains or on the coast. It's all awesome.
Favorite book or podcast that you've read or listened to recently?
I'm a big fan of Michel Houellebecq, and he's it's kind of a French version of Hunter S. Thompson. And The Possibility of an Island is just an awe-inspiring book.
What do you do for fun?
Oh, crikey. Outside of, I'm addicted to maths and physics, so I spend a lot of time playing with maths, but I ride my skateboard, ski, and enjoy cooking.
Best advice for a first-time CEO?
Listen.
Love it. Final question. What question do you never get asked that you wish you were asked more often?
Oh, my gosh. Where can I wire the $1 billion? I don't know. It's such a difficult question. Never get asked. I wish the Prime Minister of England would ring me up and ask me how to sort out Brexit, because I've got one word for him: cancel.
There you go. I love it, Phil. This has been awesome having you on. Excited to follow along with Moogsoft, and anything to plug. I know by the time this is going to air, your user conference is going to be over, but I know there's lots of ways for IT professionals and users to plug into what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the user conference in Chicago, late October, 27th, 28th, I think, off the top of my head, is obviously going to be a huge event for us. And, hit our website. There'll be some really huge announcements around new product introduction at that time, and come check it out. It's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform.